Captain Stewart Dalziel, retired. Lorne Scots for 42 years. At first, I wasn't too sure. I joined for a summer job in 1969 with two friends. They got out within a couple of years, and there I went. I was the guy that was reluctant to go, and I was the one that stayed. So when I was in a trench in Petawawa, getting eaten alive by mosquitoes when the first man stood on the moon. You know, they got the information. We listened to it on an Army radio as it happened. So the memories are unbelievable. You know, the things that I have done and got paid for and fed, not so good sometimes, but got paid for to do it. A lot of it we would have done for no money. It was never if you look back in those days, it was not for the money. $4.10 a day in '69. You know, you can't imagine. But yeah, it was really good times, and we try to train our soldiers that try to remember the good times. The bad times should be outweighed by the good times. And I keep telling myself that. I married into a military family. My wife served 42 years in the military. And I think I said I served 42, but apparently it was 43. And my brother-in-law, he served 44 years in the military. My father-in-law served in the Second World War, and most of his siblings and aunts and uncles and cousins and everything else, they all served. So there was a huge military connection with that side of the family. So there was a lot of times that we were always at something military and functions, and we had there was a lot of pride in this home with this service. It was always brought up at some time in a conversation, and well, we lived it every day with me working in the military for full-time for the last 11 years of my service, and with my wife working full-time for almost their whole 42 years. So there was a lot of uniforms in the basement, which went well. So it was important to this family. For me, I would say it's an obligation to remember my friends who've passed. It's an obligation to the young folk and the old folk that we keep it going. If we don't, you know what they say, history tends to repeat itself. So I would say that it's an obligation to all Canadians to remember the sacrifice that people made. Now that I am one, as a veteran, it's even more important. Well, they've seen it all their lives. I mean, I was in before they were born, and they're in their 30s now. They've all seen Daddy put a uniform on occasion. I went full-time after 9/11, and they probably seen that I was a little more focused on that after 9/11. So I had some time for them to adapt. I didn't just rush into everything, but I did change my lifestyle because of it, and I knew that I had to participate somehow, and I did. And as far as I'm concerned now, it was a good move. I had some difficulties that I'm still working on, but yeah, the kids, it's still not sure how it affected them. I know it affected my wife more than anybody. It's hard. Bosnia and then Afghanistan, so I was away from home for 14 months. So it isn't easy. You go away on tour and people look after your home for you. It's your family. Yeah, but that's why you're there. It affects everybody differently. We have an age gap, a very small army, but a very well trained army. When you compare it to Bosnia, Afghanistan is completely different. Bosnia was a uniformed belligerents, but they had uniforms on. Afghanistan, there was no uniforms. The uniforms were on our side. So it changed the way you thought about peacekeeping or warfare. When we came home, I had a lot of physical and mental problems. It took me, I'm still adapting. I came home in 2007, so that's 10 years ago. And I still see people to help me through it. And you get some people that didn't affect them at all. But I know a lot of people that did. And I've lost some good friends that came home and couldn't make it. They called Afghanistan the big sandbox, more like a litter box, because the smells were probably the first thing you noticed was the stench, and the food was repetitive and awful. The heat was tremendous. There was times that the thermometer wouldn't go any higher. They say 50 was a nice day. 30, we were shivering Celsius. So it got, especially carrying 75 pounds on your body every day. It does thins you out a little bit, but it was something that you had to endure. The hardest was, in the job I was doing with the Americans, is the number of deaths that I had to observe or deal with. We had the Taliban spent my 7 months trying to kill me and my boss, and we were always one step ahead of them. But they were one step behind us, so they started killing the people that we met with, and that was difficult, very difficult. That we had, supper with a bunch of the people that we were responsible for, and the next day they were dead. And we had tried to keep it secrets, but it was too hard. We had to alter our schedules and do all things because we were attached to the Afghan government too. So their people wanted us dead, and we had quite a few times that they killed some people before we got there. A lot of people. Our death toll for the police was around 70 to 100 police officers a month. A lot of Americans were killed, and we were watching what Kandahar was doing and attending funerals. So I would say that was the ramp ceremonies were tough. Any type of education is good, especially for the young next generation, so they don't repeat things that happen, or they know what to do when bad things happen. Same thing happened after Korea and after the Second World War and the First World War. In any wars, the length of time between them is how much people remember. Unless you come from a military family in Canada, it's even more difficult. So the history has to be accurate in schools, and it has to be told, not just from an education point, but it has to be told on the emotional side, so that they understand that there was a reason for it. And the reason for it was is basically to protect our families and our country. And that part, I see it all the time. People that I don't spend time with and that don't know nothing about the military, every once in a while I'll bring something up, and then I'll tell them some of my story. And that's the only thing I can give them. I just like to make a point about the soldiers that have returned. It's very difficult to engage with Veterans Affairs, and I know there's several different ways to do it, and I'm an example of that. I'm still dealing with them. The caseworkers, the ones that are on the ground, do a magnificent job. The issue is, changing of policies in government, and they don't always stay in the same jobs, especially at the bureaucratic level. It's damaged a lot of veterans, the changes that have happened. I know because I've either benefited or not benefited by it. The length of time is the part that bothers me. Everything takes 6 months to a year to make a decision. Don't know why, but I would just want to tell the young soldiers that are still out there, ask for help if you need it. There's tons of places to go to, but the first step is to ask. And if you don't, there's no need for you to suffer if you get the right help. So on that note, I thanks to all those that served.